Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to talk about 3 baits that you need to have with you for January bass fishing that will help you catch more bass. So let's get right into it. So January bass fishing can be a tough time of year to bass fish if you can even bass fish at all. Some places start to ice over or already iced over this time of year, but for a lot of the country you can still fish. The water temps are just very cold. So you need to choose your lures accordingly to mimic what the bait fish do in the water and what the bass are actually going to feel like eating. Considering their metabolism slows down greatly this time of year, they start to move a lot slower. They don't leave an area to go get a bait. They're going to stay very tight to the type of cover that they're holding on and basically wait it out until the water temps start to warm up in February or March for some parts of the country and all the way into April or May for other people. So I picked these 3 baits specifically because they accomplish the goals of being able to present the right type of forage and activity level to the bass in their area that they don't want to leave until spring comes around. And these will work in almost all parts of the country as long as your water isn't frozen. So my number 1 choice for January bass fishing would be the Ned Rig. This is an excellent bait anywhere in the country all year round. It just catches fish, but specifically in January for a few reasons. The first reason being that this is a slow-moving bait. It's something you drag in these fish's face. They don't want to move fast. They're not going to bite a crankbait flying through the water column or anything like that. This stands up on the bottom, sits right in their face. You can put it in the areas you know these fish are going to be and fish high percentage areas rather than try and cover a bunch of water and look for active bass. I like to fish areas that I know a bass will be and put a bait that I know they will bite and try and get as many bites as possible. That being said, another thing that I really like to do in cold water to get more bites is to actually downsize my presentation. So that is why I choose the Ned Rig. It's a very small profile bait. It's not big whatsoever, maybe 3 inches at the most, and it just gets bites. You might not catch the biggest fish on the Ned Rig. They do still catch big fish, but this is just going to get you bites. And in January, that's a big thing. It's hard to even get bites because of how cold the water is, and a lot of these fish very rarely feed because they don't need to as much. One meal can last them a long time because their metabolism is so slow. So just having something that might pop into their face and they just can't resist to bite will get you some more bites. So that's why I go to the Ned Rig. Let's talk a little bit about bait selection for the Ned Rig itself. The standard Z-Man TRD is always a great choice. One thing I do like to do is go to a heavier head this time of year, a 3/16 or a 1/4 ounce. That heavier jig head also allows you to get your bait into deeper water, as most of these fish will try to live near or in deeper water this time of year because that actually ends up being the warmest water that's in a lake. Another bait that works really well on the back of these Ned Rigs is actually the Z-Man TRD craw there. Again, a 2 1/4 inch craw, very small bait, but it will get bites. When I like to put a craw on my Ned Rig is on a warmer than usual day in January. So if you get a lot of sunshine and a warming trend, that's when I'll go to the craw. Typically a lot of crawfish are actually hibernating this time of year and not out and moving around. But if you get a warm day with some sun, a lot of times these bass are so close to the bank but in deep water, they'll slide up where they can get warm in the sunshine, and the crawfish think the same thing. So they'll come out for a day or two on a warm weather day, an afternoon even, and that's when the craw will really catch some fish. But my favorite Ned Rig bait for cold water months is actually a Kitech 2.8 swim bait. I know what you're saying, this probably makes it an entire different bait, but there's a way to fish this in the colder water months that will get you a lot of bites. You can cast this out there and reel it in really slow on the bottom, but if you throw this out there and hop it little hops, 3 inches, 6 inches, dragging it along the bottom rather than swimming it and fish it like you would a TRD on here, it will get a ton of bites. It mimics little shad and little minnows and stuff like that that are darting around there. They live in the same place the bass do in the wintertime because it's the warmest water. So they live right next to a bass, and if it darts in front of a bass's face, it's going to get eaten. So that's why I fish the little Kitech. So give this one a shot and it'll catch a bunch of fish this winter. Now the next bait that you need for January bass fishing is actually going to be a jig. Now the jig is a bait that works 365 days a year and almost on any body of water, but there's a couple things that you need to pay attention to with your jig in the wintertime that will actually get you more bites. So the first thing you need to pay attention to with your bait is the size. Just like we talked about with the Ned Rig, you want to downsize your presentation and profile to try and get you some more bites. When it comes to a flipping jig, the first thing I do is actually go down on the head size. So where I would usually throw a 1/2 ounce jig, I would throw a 3/8 ounce or even a 5/16 to make a slower fall and a smaller jig to get more bites when I'm flipping it up shallow. Those would be on those warmer sunny days we talked about when those craws really come out and try and get a little bit of sunshine. But on the colder days when those fish are still staying offshore, they're in 30, 40 feet of water, you still have to go with a big football jig in that 3/4 or 1 ounce range. You can buy flipping jigs and football jigs that come with finesse cut skirt material, shorter skirts on them, a smaller hook in them, and it makes it a much more compact profile than a standard size football or flipping jig with a big stranded skirt and a 4/0 giant hook in there. So a couple good examples would be like the Ike's mini flip jig, the Buckeye Lures finesse jig, or any bait like that that has a smaller presentation and can get you a lot of bites while you're out there on the water. The second thing you need to focus on in the wintertime with your jigs is actually your trailer selection. The first thing we're going to do again is we're going to go smaller on our bait. So where I would typically throw a 4-inch beaver or something like that, or a full-size rage craw, we're going to go down in size and we're going to throw a 2.5-inch jig chunk. Not much to it. It's not going to bulk up the bait up top here because it's just a chunk of plastic for the hook to hold in. Then the second thing that we're going to focus on with our jig trailers is our action. So in this case, we're not going to throw something that has appendages like a rage craw or a rage bug or something like that that really moves a lot of water. You don't want that in your jig in the wintertime with how the fish are moving that time of year. That's why I go to this jig chunk. It has no action to it. They're just flat claws, and all they do is just hang on the back of the jig and make it look like it's a complete presentation. And as you can see with this jig here, I actually thread my trailer up on the jig itself so that it's not just dangling off the hook, allowing it to flap like this in the water. It's pinned in one place, and just these claws have a little bit of movement to it. I'm really cutting back on the amount of action that my baits produce this time of year. And the final bait that you need to have with you for January bass fishing is probably the greatest cold water bait ever made, and that is the blade bait. This bait absolutely catches them no matter how cold the water gets. Guys literally ice fish with these up here in the Northeast. So they will catch fish no matter what time of year, but especially in the cold weather months. The colder the water, the better this bait works compared to anything else. And the reason being, it imitates a dying bait fish better than anything else on the market when they're in that cold water die-off period. When the waters get really, really cold in January and February, the shad and bluegill and small perch and stuff like that in the lake that aren't healthy enough to make it through the winter will actually start to die off because they're cold-blooded and can't take the cold weather, and they will start to flutter around on the bottom and trying to live. And you can see just by that, it's putting out some flash, and it'll really grab a fish's attention and get them to come over and look at it. And you're fishing it very slow, so they have time to work their way over and see the bait and take a look at it and investigate, and it almost is like a jerk bait that you can fish on the bottom. I keep my color selection very, very simple with a blade bait when I'm fishing it in the wintertime. Pretty much if your lake has shad or any other type of little bait fish like that, alewife, stuff like that, the chrome is going to work the best, especially on sunny days. It's going to put off a lot of flash. It really looks like those shad. It's probably the best mimicking bait you can use. But if your lake has perch in it, this is going to be the color that I like to use the most, and it's actually just going to be a gold one. The gold one mimics the little baby perch really, really well, and a lot of times those fish like to feed on those perch in the wintertime, especially smallmouth bass. So if you have smallmouth and perch in the lake, especially on cloudy days or sunny days as well, the gold works a lot better than the silver would if your lake doesn't have shad in it. If you enjoyed this video talking about 3 baits that you need to have for January bass fishing, go ahead and click this video right here where I'll actually show you how to fish this blade bait to make sure you're catching the most amount of fish while you're out there on the water this winter. So if you enjoyed the video, leave a like down below. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of my fishing videos coming up. Thanks for watching.